William Clyde Gibson III was born in 1957 in Raleigh, North Carolina, the youngest of 4 children. When he was 2, his family moved to New Albany, Indiana, chasing steadier work. His father trimmed trees for a living. His mother rang up groceries at Sears. On paper, it wasn't a tragic childhood. Gibson later said he wasn't mistreated, but his father drank a lot. And when he drank, he turned mean. Even as a boy, something felt off. Gibson didn't play well with others. He struggled in school. He isolated. He was bullied until 6th grade. And then the script flipped. He became the bully. At 13, he started drinking. Not experimenting, but drinking. He was soon arrested for stealing a motorbike. Not long after, he dropped out of school completely. And the spiral had only just begun. Gibson joined the U.S. Army and served as a mechanic in West Germany. There, he began using all kinds of illegal substances. He often mixed these with drinks. In 1979, he was discharged for taking a car without permission. He spent a year at Fort Leavenworth. While there, he tried to end his life by slitting his wrists. His illegal behavior grew worse over the years. In 1991, he was involved in a car crash, but instead of staying at the scene, as required by law, he fled. He was later charged with theft involving force and a non-consensual intimate act in a phone booth. He entered a plea that let him deny responsibility. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. He refused to join a program meant to help people who commit intimate offenses. After his release in 1999, Gibson kept breaking the law with theft and physical harm. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and given medication, but he did not stick with treatment. He left jail again in 2002. On October 10, 2002, Gibson met 44-year-old Karen Sue Hodella at a bar in Jeffersonville. They spent time together and ended up in a New Albany parking lot. They argued over prescription pills. Gibson punched her, then struck her throat multiple times with a small, sharp object. He left her body near Clarksville. Her remains were found on January 7, 2003. The case stayed unsolved until Gibson admitted responsibility in 2012. On March 24, 2012, Gibson met 35-year-old Stephanie Kirk at a bar in New Albany. They used substances and had consensual intimacy. Back at his home, they argued about medication. Gibson forced himself on Kirk and cut off her air supply. He then broke her back and buried her remains in his backyard. But that wasn't the end. On April 18, 2012, Gibson's late mother's friend, 75-year-old Christine Weise, visited him. Gibson forced himself on her until she lost strength. He cut off one of her breasts and left her in his garage. The next day, his sister found her and called police. That same day, Gibson was arrested for drunk driving in Weise's car. After his arrest, Gibson admitted to the homicides of Weise and Hodella. He also led police to Kirk's burial spot. He was charged in all 3 cases. Prosecutors asked for the most severe punishment in Weise and Kirk's cases. In October 2013, a jury found Gibson responsible for Weise's passing after just 17 minutes of deliberation. He was given a capital sentence. He showed little emotion and said he deserved it. In March 2014, Gibson pleaded guilty in Hodella's case and received 65 years in prison. 5 months later, he pleaded guilty in Kirk's case and received another capital sentence. Gibson has appealed his sentences many times. The Indiana Supreme Court has kept his convictions. He now remains at Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, in the section for individuals serving capital sentences. The next individual spent a lifetime being overlooked until the night he made sure everyone would remember his name. Eric Darnell Holmes was born in 1968. From the start, life was unforgiving. His mother passed away when he was just 7 years old. After that, he was passed between caregivers, many of whom neglected or mistreated him. Despite everything, Holmes stayed under the radar. No juvenile record, no adult charges. But his struggles ran deep. He had a low IQ score, just 79, and problems with school, friendships, and physical health. For years he drifted, quiet, unnoticed. But that changed on November 16, 1989. Holmes was 21, working at a Shoney's restaurant in Marion County, Indiana, until that day. He got into an argument with a coworker named Amy Foshee. She won. He lost his job. And that night, he decided to get even. Holmes had told a friend, "I'm going to take her life tonight." He and Vance had planned this ahead of time. They picked that moment after the workers left to carry out their plan. As the restaurant was closing, Foshee walked out with managers Charles Irvin, 30, and Teresa Blosel, 20. Irvin carried the day's cash. Holmes and his friend Michael Vance waited in the foyer. Holmes stood by the exit. Vance stood near the inside door. Both had sharp weapons. They harmed all three workers with repeated cuts. Irvin and Blosel did not survive. Foshee did. Police arrested Holmes soon after. He faced charges for taking 2 lives, trying to take another life, theft, and planning theft. His trial began in November 1992. The jury found him guilty on every count. They could not agree on whether he should face the ultimate punishment. The judge then gave him that punishment anyway, because the taking of lives happened during a theft and because there were multiple victims. Michael Vance went to trial on his own. He received a 190-year prison term. In 1996, the Indiana Supreme Court confirmed Holmes's sentence. He has asked for new reviews many times. Every request has been denied. As of May 2025, he is still waiting for the final step of his sentence at the Indiana State Prison. He has waited longer under this sentence than anyone else in the state. Next is Isim, who transformed his apartment into a horrific scene and faced armed police in Gary. Kevin Charles Isim seemed like an ordinary man. Born in 1965, he lived with his wife Cassandra and her 2 children in a quiet apartment complex in Gary, Indiana. He wasn't flashy. He kept to himself. But those who knew him say something had shifted in the weeks before it happened. A growing bitterness, a weight behind the eyes. But on the night of August 6th, 2007, everything exploded into chaos. Gunshots ripped through the calm at Lakeshore Dunes apartments. Neighbors froze. Then came the screams. The calls to 911. Police raced to the scene and were met with more gunfire from inside the home. Officers ducked for cover. A tense standoff unfolded. When a SWAT team finally breached the door, they found Kevin Isim sitting silently on the floor, motionless, distant. A .357 Magnum slipped from his waistband. Near him, a .40 caliber pistol and a 12-gauge shotgun. Then came the discovery no one was ready for. Inside the apartment, the bodies of Cassandra and her 2 children lay sprawled across the rooms, all of them shot multiple times. The next day, investigators sat down with Isim. He seemed calm, disconnected. Said he couldn't believe what had happened to his family. Said he didn't remember aiming a gun at the officers. But mental health experts later concluded he was competent. Whatever else he claimed to forget, the court ruled he understood enough. Isim faced 6 charges. 3 counts were for taking life. 3 counts were for trying to take the lives of police officers. His first trial began in February 2012. After days of hearings, the jury could not reach a decision. That trial ended without a verdict. A second trial started in January 2013. Prosecutors called over 1,100 people to consider serving on the jury. At the end, the jury found Isim responsible on all 6 counts. They voted that he should receive the maximum punishment for each count. The judge agreed and handed down 3 of the capital punishments. Isim appealed. He argued that his lawyers had not done a good job defending him. The courts looked at his claim and denied it. The Indiana Supreme Court also reviewed the case and agreed with the lower courts. As of May 2025, Kevin Isim remains in state custody under those sentences. The next man struggled with anxiety his whole life, until one night it turned into something far more dangerous. Before we move on, consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Michael Dean Overstreet was born on November 18, 1966, into a world that was already breaking. His childhood was unstable and painful. His father battled with heavy drinking. Home was a place of chaos. and mistreatment was something he endured. Even so, Overstreet tried to build something better. He earned his high school equivalency diploma. He got married, had children, worked steady jobs to support them. But the damage from his early years didn't disappear. It lingered. In his teens, doctors diagnosed him with severe anxiety. The cracks ran deep, even if most people didn't see them. Then came the night of September 26, 1997. Kelly Eckhart, just 18 years old, had just finished her shift at Walmart. It was late. She drove toward home, the same drive she'd done countless times before. But this time, she didn't make it. Her car was found abandoned on the side of the road. Headlights still glowing, her purse left inside. She had vanished, and the quiet dread that settled over the town would soon turn into something far worse. Overstreet forced Eckhart into his van against her will. He drove her to a quiet spot out of sight. There, he used unwanted intimate contact to harm her. Next, he wrapped a strap and a shoelace around her neck until she lost consciousness. To be certain she would not make it out alive, he then fired a shot to her head. Days later, park rangers found her body in a ravine near Camp Atterbury. Police soon focused on Overstreet. They matched fibers from inside his van to fibers on Eckhart's clothes. DNA tests confirmed his role in her passing. At trial, prosecutors charged Overstreet with Eckhart's passing, forcing her against her will, and committing a non-consensual intimate act. He entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. In April 2000, a jury found him responsible on all counts. They recommended the harshest penalty the state allows, and the judge accepted that on July 31, 2000. In the years after, Overstreet showed clear signs of serious mental illness. He had hallucinations and held firm false beliefs. In 2014, a judge decided he could not fully grasp why he faced the state's ultimate punishment. The state chose not to challenge that finding. As of May 2025, Overstreet remains confined under his sentence in Indiana. Because a court has ruled him unable to understand his punishment, the state has not carried it out. He would only face that penalty if a new court later finds him fit to do so. But how does a stolen van, a scared young man, and a split-second decision lead to one of Indiana's rarest sentences? Benjamin Donnie Richie was born in 1980 in Indiana. His early years were unstable. His mother, Marion Martin, struggled with substance use even during pregnancy. She worked as a stripper and left him twice before he turned 3. Richie never met his biological father. When Marion's husband, Donald Peoples, learned Richie was not his son, he left and took Richie's 2 older half-brothers with him. Richie was later adopted by Verna and Oscar Richie and took their last name. School was never easy for Richie. He repeated first grade and eventually dropped out by 9th. Behind the scenes, there was more going on. At just 10 years old, he was already seeing a minister for counseling. That same year, he was admitted to Community North Hospital, where doctors diagnosed him with bipolar disorder and cognitive impairments, struggles they linked to a chaotic childhood and prenatal substance exposure from his mother. By August 1998, Richie had already been convicted of a break-in. He was on probation, trying, and failing, to stay out of trouble. Then came September 29, 2000. That night, Richie and 2 others stole a white van from a Beech Grove gas station. Just 2 hours later, the van was spotted. Officer Matthew Hickey initiated the pursuit. Officers Robert Mercury and William Toney joined the chase. The van swerved off the road and stopped in a residential front yard. Richie jumped out and ran. Officer Toney gave chase, unaware of what was about to happen. As the 2 sprinted across the yard, Richie pulled out a 9mm Glock and fired. 4 shots rang out. One of them struck Officer Toney just above his bulletproof vest. He later passed away from his wounds. Officer William Toney was just 31 years old. He had served since 1998. That night, he left behind not just his badge, but a wife and 2 young daughters. The next day, police found Richie at Michael Moody's home. Moody was the 3rd person involved in taking the van. Richie faced several charges: causing the passing of an officer, having a firearm as a serious offender, taking the van, and resisting officers. Prosecutors asked for the harshest sentence because Richie was on probation during the shooting, and because the person he shot was serving as an officer. At the trial, which began on July 31, 2002, Richie's accomplice Michael Greer testified under a plea deal. Greer said Richie feared going back to prison and that fear led him to shoot Officer Tony. On August 10, 2002, the jury found Richie guilty on all counts. 4 days later, the same jury recommended the capital sentence. On October 15, 2002, the judge formally imposed that sentence. Richie also received 20 years for unlawful gun possession, 3 years for stealing the van, and 3 years for resisting officers. Richie appealed. He argued that his mental health problems and learning issues weren't given enough weight at trial. He also said his lawyers did not represent him well. The Indiana Supreme Court reviewed the case and confirmed both his conviction and sentence. In May 2025, Richie went before the Indiana Parole Board. He expressed remorse and asked for mercy. He called that night a train that left the station with no brakes, referring to the choices he made. The state set May 20th, 2025, for carrying out his capital sentence. This will be only the second time Indiana has done so in over 15 years. The next individual was trusted to care for them. So how did that night end in duct tape, fire, and 2 young lives lost? Jeffrey Allen Weise was born in 1978. By 2010, he lived in Evansville, Indiana, with his girlfriend Lisa Lynch and her 2 children. Alyssa was 8. Caleb was 5. Lisa was expecting Weise's child at the time. She worked night shifts. That left Weise in charge of the children overnight. In the early hours of April 10, 2010, a fire broke out at their home on Fisher Road. Firefighters found Alyssa and Caleb inside. Both children had passed in the blaze. Investigators determined the fire had been set on purpose. Caleb's hands and feet were bound with duct tape. A dish towel had been pushed into his mouth. 2 flares sat near his body. The autopsy showed both children were alive when the flames began. Why would someone do this to 2 young children? Prosecutors said Weise planned every step. They said he wanted to get rid of the children while their mother was away. No clear reason has ever emerged, but the way the fire was set and the bindings on Caleb pointed to careful planning. After the fire, Weise left Indiana. He was arrested soon after. He faced 2 charges for causing the children's passings and 1 severe arson charge. Because the case drew a lot of public attention in Vanderburgh County, it moved to Clark County. At trial, the defense did not deny that Weise caused the children's passings. They said he was deeply depressed at the time. They argued he was not thinking clearly. They pointed to his long-standing mental health struggles. Can mental health affect how the law views a case like this? It can matter, but the jury decided that the number of victims and their ages outweighed any questions about his mental state. On June 19, 2013, after less than 2 hours of discussion, the jury found him guilty on all counts. They recommended the harshest sentence allowed. On July 11, 2013, the judge followed that recommendation. Weise appealed. He said his lawyers did not do a good enough job. He wanted more evidence about how he adjusted to life in detention. On February 18, 2015, the Indiana Supreme Court upheld both his convictions and his sentence. Later appeals, including a request for a review of his detention conditions, were also denied. Roy Lee Ward was born in 1972. He grew up in a troubled home. His parents split up and later divorced. His childhood was unstable. This may have led to his harmful actions later on. He struggled in school. He had low intellectual abilities. Doctors also noted an exhibitionism disorder, which meant he had urges to expose himself in public. This behavior may have been linked to what he did afterward. Before the case with Stacey Payne, Ward had about 12 convictions. Most were for public indecency and showing himself where he shouldn't. At the time he harmed Stacey, he was already on probation for breaking into a home in Missouri. On July 11, 2001, in Dale, Indiana, Ward went into the house of 15-year-old Stacey Payne. He said he was looking for a lost dog. Once inside, he struck Stacey several times with a sharp weapon. Stacey screamed and her 14-year-old sister, Melissa, heard her cries. Melissa called 911 right away. Officers arrived and caught Ward there at the scene. Stacy was rushed to the hospital but did not survive her wounds. In his first trial in Spencer County, Ward was found guilty of causing Stacy's passing and an unlawful intimate act. The judge gave him the most severe penalty. In 2004, the Indiana Supreme Court threw out those verdicts. They said the trial had too much local news coverage and community bias, so the case needed a new location. At his second trial, Ward admitted he was guilty. The jury then held a separate hearing on punishment. They again chose capital punishment. The judge also added 2 back-to-back 50-year prison terms for the non-consensual intimate offenses. Ward's lawyers tried to overturn that decision. They argued the original trial team did not show evidence that might have led the jury to choose a lesser penalty. The Indiana Supreme Court refused their request, saying any extra evidence probably would not have changed the verdict. In 2017, Ward filed a lawsuit to pause carrying out his sentence. He challenged the state's method for doing so. The Indiana Supreme Court agreed that the state could not use its new medication combination until the prison department updated its procedures. As of May 2025, Ward remains in custody, waiting for his sentence to be carried out. Ongoing legal actions continue to delay that process.